Hey everybody, this is Randy, and welcome to another Core Group webinar. So we're finally in prime time, the time of year we've all been waiting for. Boy, there sure is a lot of big bucks hitting the ground these days, I'll tell you. Just happened to see a picture of a monster also taken in Washtenaw County here in Michigan. Just saw that like 10 minutes ago. What a beast that thing is. That thing's well over 200 inches. Would love to hear the story on that one. So, this is a time of year that you never know what's going to step out, right? And feel very fortunate, to get an opportunity at some of these big bucks. 2 days later, Greg is telling me that him and his buddy Steve, this is Greg here on the right and Steve, his friend, on the left side. Remember, these are the two guys I put up the two redneck blinds with on Greg's property back in August. Well, they were going to go hunting for the first time on October the 27th, which was last week Saturday. And so right here, we're getting ready to pull up that 15-foot redneck blind, and Greg's got the tow strap, and Steve is going to throw it over top of the cover and then hook it onto the ATV and then pull it up, you remember. And so on the 27th in the morning, I had sent this picture over to Greg just to let him know that I was out hunting and I was going to ask him a question. But I took a picture of a little 6-point that had walked right underneath me. And I said, this little guy walked underneath me this morning chasing does. And I asked Greg how his hunt went in the morning, because he had told me the previous day him and Steve were going to be out there in the morning. He told me he didn't hunt in the morning. So that was at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Greg had gotten up into, they started hunting on Saturday around 1 in the afternoon instead of in the morning. So they were just going to sit out there till dark. Then about 4 hours later, just right at around 6:30, I get this text from Greg saying that Steve shot the Big Ten. I go, wow, from which stand? I was curious where Steve was sitting because Greg didn't tell me. So turned out Steve was sitting on the 15-foot redneck. So great, I'm really looking forward to getting a picture. And then Steve sent me this picture here. And man alive, he shot a 160 10-point, and the way it happened is pretty unreal, and I'm still kind of get chills just thinking about it, because it followed the script perfectly. And this was the very first hunt that these guys spent on this property in 2018. Thank goodness Greg was able to buy into the idea of not hunting it in early October, or at least staying out of the core area, right, in early October. And so they did, and boy, it really paid off. They didn't even hunt any of the doe spots in early October. Congratulations to Steve. Greg thinks that this thing is probably 4 or 5 years old, but they submitted the jawbone to get it checked out. They really wanted to get it aged. And he said that the face on this buck had one of those big Roman noses. The body was just a tank. So they were going to get it weighed as well. So I'm real curious to know what it weighed and what the age is, and I'll pass that along to you. But, not bad for the very first time these guys hunt a property that Greg just picks up in 2018, and Steve shoots a 160. So just incredible. If we look at the setup here, here's Greg's property. The wind's coming out of the northeast, and this is the redneck blind that Steve was sitting in. Greg was sitting over here in the 10-foot redneck blind. So if we zoom in a little bit, here's the core area, and Greg and Steve, they both walked in down here. Greg took this little route, got in the 10-foot redneck to look over this little food plot, and Steve kept on going through the pines, went out on the backside and came in on the backside of that 15-foot redneck, got up in here, and then he's looking over the autumn olive on his left side and the real little food plot on his right side with a connector trail right in between. Well, right at around 6:30, a lot of the leaves are down, so Steve can see through here a little bit, at least see if there's deer coming. He saw a buck coming through the woods right here, and it was right inside the cover. And it was right on that little trail that I created. Remember that there was a trail that the deer were taking right through here, and they were going through the real little food plot, and then they were cutting across, and right on the edge of these pines here, they were cutting all the way across here, and then going downhill toward the water, and probably going through this little funnel right here. Well, if they had done that, nobody would ever be able to get a shot, at least with a bow, all the way down to the spot here, because I mean, by the time you'd see that deer, it'd be too late, you know. So remember, I took some time and I hinge cut this area right here to block these deer off. Did not want them coming through here, so I forced them to come out. And remember, they would pop their head out right in front of the redneck blind, right across this little connector trail, and then they would have to make a decision, go right or left, because it was too thick right here to get through. So if they went right, they'd have a shot, and if they went left, they'd have a shot. Well, this buck, sure enough, you know, with the northwest wind, this buck came down along the south side, the downwind side of the food plot, and he is scent checking every deer that's in this food plot. There wasn't any that Steve knew at the time in the food plot. It was still only just not even quite 6:30 yet. But, you know, he's scent checking for does. He's scent checking for any competition in this food plot. And when he got to the end here, instead of coming all the way to the end and popping his head out into this connector trail, you know, sure enough, being a 4 or 5-year-old buck, he wanted to stay in the cover. And he took a right turn right here and then went right to the corner. And that's where Steve shot him right here, right on the corner, 22 yards in front of his blind, right through the window. Just, I mean, he couldn't believe it. And the funny thing is, Steve had just opened that window half hour prior because he figured it was getting kind of close to prime time, and so he didn't want to make any unnecessary noises by opening a window with a deer out there. So funny thing is, he had just opened it, and here come this buck, and it all worked out perfectly. The buck ran 40 yards right through the autumn olive plot, and he expired right here where the X is. And the funny thing is, this is exactly where Greg and I found that deadhead skull back in the spring when Greg and I looked at the property for the first time to determine whether or not it was worth Greg buying or not. So when they found the deer, they took some pictures and whatnot, and then they dragged it out to the edge of the food plot. So what they did then is they walked back all the way to their vehicle, which was, you know, way back over here. And they jumped into the ATV, and they took the ATV back out here. They actually went down through this food plot, and then they took this upper trail that goes all the way around. They went all the way through the small food plot, past the blind, over into the autumn olive plot. They threw the deer on the back of the ATV, and then they just hightailed it right back out of there again. And then they gutted it. They gutted it over here somewhere. And so when I explained to Greg, I says, "Oh, you found it right by this tree stand number 1, huh?" Talking to him on the phone. He says, "Yeah." And I says, "Well, shoot, you guys could have just dragged it right over here to the tree, because Stewart had made a forestry mulch trail right up to that stand." And all of a sudden it hit Greg, "Oh, shoot. Yeah, we could have. It was only like, 20, 30 yards to drag the deer over to the stand, and then they could have drove the ATV right up to it and picked it up." And, and they all they would have had is just come right up here and then leave again. Instead, they went all the way around through the core areas. And Greg says, "Yeah, you know what? I haven't even owned the property a year yet, and it just never really occurred to me yet." So anyway, not a big deal. It's not like they left a foot trail with scent, right? I mean, it was just on an ATV, and the area is real thick and cover and whatnot, and so the deer had probably already vacated it because it was like 8, 9 o'clock. And, the deer are probably already out on the soybean fields, the neighbor's soybean fields over here. And so, no harm, no foul, but, he'll definitely remember that next time. So that's how the situation's set up. But, when they called me on the phone to tell me how it happened, they could not believe that day that I took them and I showed them exactly. I says, "Now look at guys, this is what's going to happen. These bucks are going to come down this trail. They're going to pop out right here, or we're going to force them to pop out right here. So be ready." And Steve just couldn't believe it. He says, "Man, they did exactly what you said," and gave him a nice 22-yard shot. And so, very gratifying to me to be able to help somebody be successful like that. Is just I think I was on cloud 9 is about as long as what Steve was. It just was so gratifying to be able to know that you help somebody maybe shoot the buck of their lifetime. So just as a reminder, you probably remember what it looked like back in the woods where we put up the 15-foot redneck. And the funny thing is, Steve is out on the ATV pulling the blind up, and right at this point, when he's pulling up this redneck blind, that ATV is about right in the same exact spot as where he shot the buck. And just very ironic, you know. Once we got the redneck blind up, this is what the view looked like out into that autumn olive plot to the left side. And, you know, obviously there was way too much brush. We had to do a lot of shooting lane clearing and whatnot. And so this was before we cut out the shooting lanes, and this is after we cleared out the shooting lanes. And so this is where the buck was, right at the X, where Steve shot him, 22-yard shot, and then the buck took off running, went down through the autumn olive plot, went into the woods here, and then expired. It just worked out perfectly. I mean, you almost couldn't even write a better script. And the funny thing is, the other tree stand that I was telling you about is right over here on the other side of the autumn olive plot, where they could have just dragged the buck over here and then picked it up with the ATV. So I asked Steve what the food plot looked like as far as greenery, and he says it was really, really green. He could tell that they were in there eating it, but you know, there's still going to be food in there for a while, so I was really encouraged to hear that. So this is the view from ground level. And you can see it's not a very long shot, 22 yards. You know, the blind is in the woods, probably around 15 yards, and then, you know, another 7 yards to where the deer was standing. That deer came out walking through the thick cover, and he just came right out around the other side of this little autumn olive bush. Great shot, and real happy for those guys. This is a short clip from a 45-minute webinar that goes in depth on how to improve and manipulate your deer habitat so you can attract and hold more mature bucks on your property during the hunting season. These webinars are for core group members only who are serious about increasing their opportunities at taking mature bucks in high hunting pressured areas. Membership into the core group is 50% off the regular price until midnight tonight, New Year's Eve 2018. For more details on the core group and how you can join to learn how to attract and hold more mature bucks on your hunting property, click the link below in the description of this video.